Welcome to another lesson in APUS history. Today we're looking at the British colonies, specifically looking at the middle colonies. So just a reminder of the objective that we've been going through. We're talking about how the environmental and other factors shape the development of the British colonies. And specifically with the middle colonies, what you need to know is that they supported a flourishing export economy based on cereal crops and attracted a broad range of European migrants, leading to societies with greater cultural, ethnic, and religious diversity and tolerance. And then additionally, each of these, four mini lessons on the four colonial regions does look at their specific implementation of self-government. So a little background, and then looking at the four colonies that make up the middle colonies, addressing labor, self-government, and the impact on American Indians. So I've got two previous videos, one for the Chesapeake and one for New England, where you hopefully have already seen this information and jotted down your own notes. But if you're just joining me now, you might want to copy down this chart and fill in the notes as we go. So first of all, the middle colonies are four different colonial regions. We've got New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And the two major cities within them will be Philadelphia and New York City. So a little background here is that this area was originally settled by the Dutch. As far as the Europeans who settled here, it was originally settled by the Dutch. And it was fairly small communities. It wasn't a large settlement like what we saw with the Spanish in the Spanish Empire. And there were primarily positive relationships with American Indians because of the fur trade and that dependence, the mutual trade that occurred with the fur trade. And from the get-go, New Amsterdam was a haven for those who were dissenting or going against the Protestant religion, going against the Puritans. And so a variety of religious groups and ethnic groups ended up settling in this area. Very active in the slave trade while it was part of the Dutch Empire. But in the middle of the 1600s, King Charles II gave the region to his brother, and the English came, and it was a pretty easy transfer of power from the Dutch to the English. The Dutch didn't put up too much of a fight because they had colonies elsewhere that they deemed more profitable. So in 1664, the Duke of York, who was King Charles's brother, divided the colony into two parts. He kept New York for himself and then gave New Jersey to two separate allies, which is why on that first map you saw it said, I believe it was East Jersey and West Jersey. The Dutch were allowed to remain in the region, and they were allowed to have religious freedom. They were allowed to speak their language. And so from the beginning, this area had no official religion. These areas will be primarily settled for economic purposes, seeking wealth for the Duke of York. Great harbors, especially in New York, but there was no representative assembly until much later, 1683. He finally gave a representative assembly or allowed for that to happen in the region. Pennsylvania and Delaware. So Pennsylvania literally means Penn's Woods, and it was founded by William Penn, who was a Quaker. King Charles owed a significant debt to the Penn family, and so he fulfilled that debt by giving this land in North America to the family. It was a haven not just for Quakers. So even though Penn was a Quaker, he allowed for other religious groups to settle there. Quakers were so persecuted in New England that even some were killed or executed. For example, Mary Dyer is one name that you might come across. So Philadelphia is named the city of brotherly love, and there was a frame of government that was written, which allowed for an elected assembly and a constitution. And when that happened, when the frame of government occurred, some southern colonies in Pennsylvania split away and formed Delaware. And those colonies had always been, or those counties had always been separate anyways, because those had previously been settled by New Sweden and had many lingering people from that area. And they were known for having peaceful trade with American Indians in contrast to some of our other regions that we've discussed. So it's called the Holy Experiment because it's not just for Quakers, and Penn wanted to see if he could allow for religious freedom while also maintaining a profit. And Quakers have some unique beliefs that are unique in comparison to the Puritans of New England. They believed in gender equality, nonviolence. They were resistant to military service, and they believed that that self-revelation would occur in regards to religion, not revelation from the Bible. And so they created what was called the Charter of Liberties, which guaranteed freedom of religion and unrestricted immigration in the region. Some other characteristics, this is where we kind of tie back to our key objective, where we look at how the environment impacted the development of the colony. They had extremely productive farms, especially in regards to cereal crops like grains, and they were nicknamed the breadbasket. They had excellent harbors, and so they were able to export their crops easily. And because of that excellent trade that occurred, the cities grew fairly wealthy. And so Philadelphia and New York became some of the largest cities in the early colonial times. And there were dense forests, the fur trade occurred. We have artisans working in the cities, and it is the most diverse region. So if you look at that graph up there, you can see that while the English were the largest group, they were only 39% of the population. So extremely diverse here. And because they were that diverse, they also expressed a lot of tolerance for differences. So here's a quote that came later in about 1793, but it's talking about the peoples of the Middle Colonies, specifically in New York. Here, individuals of all nations are melted into a new race of men, whose labors and posterity will one day cause great changes in the world. So just really emphasizing that sharp diversity that occurred and how unique that was in comparison to other parts of the colonies and other parts of the world. Labor in the Middle Colonies, we see indentured servitude and slavery occurring. Philadelphia and New York are going to have large populations of enslaved Africans. New York specifically will have one of the largest concentrations in the entire North. But all of the colonies will have slavery at some point in the colonial period. Self-government, in fact, all four of our regions had initially opposed self-government, but over time allowed for self-government to occur with the election of representative assemblies. When William Penn wrote the frame of government, he included a preface and introduction, and he said, "Any government is free to the people, whatever be the frame, where the laws rule, and the people are party to those laws. And more than that, or anything else, is tyranny, oligarchy, and confusion." And so he's really saying that a government must be by the people, or it will become tyrannical. So here's some key characteristics for you. The combination of motives, wealth, and religious freedom, highly populated, which was a diverse population. There were excellent harbors and a mixed economy. All right, and then as previously mentioned, the impact on American Indians is a continuation of the fur trade, which was one of which was dependent on positive interactions. And in Pennsylvania specifically, with those Quaker beliefs, Penn insisted on paying American Indians a fair price for land. So we saw something similar with Roger Williams in Rhode Island, but this is more unique than most other regions. That peaceful trade, and in fact, the relationships in the area were significantly more positive that other Native American tribes who had been displaced relocated to Pennsylvania. All right, so there are your final characteristics here for the Middle Colonies. And there you have it on your entire chart. So I hope that that was helpful for comparing. Really what you want to remember is that the Middle Colonies are between New England and Chesapeake. And so it does have some similarities to both. We see some of the cash crops being similar to the Chesapeake, while also some of the ideas of religion being influenced by the New England region. So stay tuned for one more lesson on 2.3, where we will talk about the Southern colonies. And hopefully you feel comfortable with the objective, thinking about how those environmental and other factors affected the development of the region. And if it was helpful, please like and subscribe.